Somewhere in a kitchen drawer right now, buried under rubber bands and old batteries, there is a gadget from 1986 that got used exactly twice. The 1980s were packed with products that promised to change everything. New sodas, futuristic gadgets, toys that looked incredible in the commercial and fell apart by Christmas afternoon. Companies spent millions convincing Americans they needed things that nobody actually wanted. Some of these items disappeared so fast that even the people who owned them forgot they ever existed. But the moment you see them again, it all comes rushing back. The packaging, the jingle, the disappointment. So hit subscribe and settle in, because here are 60 items from the 1980s that completely failed. You could smell the sizzling fajitas before you even walked in the door. Chi-Chi's was not just a restaurant, it was an event. Tex-Mex was still new to most American towns, and Chi-Chi's made it feel like a party every time. Bright colors, huge plates, and that signature fried ice cream made it a destination for birthdays, anniversaries, or just a break from the usual. It was the first introduction many people had to things like chimichangas and salsa that came in jars. But behind the scenes, Chi-Chi's was a ticking time bomb. The rapid expansion across the United States meant quality slipped. Food prep got sloppy. And then the worst-case scenario, an outbreak of hepatitis A tied to contaminated green onions in one of its restaurants. It killed 4 people and sickened hundreds. The trust was gone. No birthday song could bring it back. Lawsuits piled up. Chi-Chi's tried to rebrand, but the damage was irreversible. By the early 2000s, its last American location had closed. It was heartbreaking for those who grew up with it. A place where memories were made, now just another abandoned lot. The name still lives on in some frozen food aisles, but it is not the same. The party was over, and it ended in silence. Zima was not a drink, it was a statement. Clear, carbonated, and pretending to be cool, it was what you drank if beer felt too heavy and wine coolers felt too soft. Launched by Coors in the early 1990s, Zima was the original malternative. It promised sophistication and lightness, but mostly it confused people. Was it a soda? Was it alcohol? Was it water that made you weird? It came in a sleek, frosted bottle that practically screamed, "Drink me if you dare." Bars stocked it, teenagers bragged about sneaking it, and for a few months it felt like the edgy drink of choice. But the taste never landed. Too citrusy, too artificial, too indecisive. Zima could never decide what it wanted to be, and customers could feel that. You didn't drink Zima because you liked it. You drank it because you wanted to try something new, even if it fizzled fast. Zima had early success, riding high on curiosity and novelty, but that wave crashed hard. It became the butt of every joke. Even in its commercials, you could feel the brand trying too hard. And in a decade where image was everything, Zima's identity crisis was fatal. By the early 2000s, it quietly disappeared, only to be revived once or twice like a ghost at a reunion. But for a fleeting moment, cracking open a Zima felt like sipping from the future. It just turned out the future had better taste. Gimbel's was the city's second favorite, but first in our hearts. Overshadowed by Macy's, it never quite got the glory. But Gimbel's had grit. It had soul. Where Macy's sparkled, Gimbel's grounded. Its Thanksgiving parade came first. Its windows were full of wonder. When you walked through its doors, you didn't feel intimidated. You felt welcomed. It was the kind of place where children pressed their noses to snowy glass in winter, watching elves move on little motors and wooden toys dance in perfect rhythm. It was where your parents met on a lunch break, or where you got your ears pierced, or where Grandma worked behind the glove counter for 20 years. The ceilings were high, the marble scuffed, and the escalators slow. But that was the charm. Every floor had its story. The basement had deals. The top floor had class. The middle? That's where the memories lived. Gimbel's was an anchor of routine, joy, and city life. But like many department stores, it was caught in a changing tide. Fast fashion, discount giants, and the rise of suburban malls pulled the rug out. And soon the parades ended, the windows went dark, and the neon sign flickered off one last time. The space it held in the skyline was replaced, but the space it held in our lives, irreplaceable. How did we forget the store that remembered us? Joseph Newman was either a visionary or a brilliant con artist. In 1979, he introduced the world to his energy machine, an invention he claimed could produce more energy than it consumed, a perpetual motion device, the holy grail of science. The problem? Physics said no. So did the United States Patent Office. So did every independent lab that examined it. But Newman was relentless. He held public demonstrations, filed lawsuits, even ran for Congress to get attention. For a while, he became a cult hero for anti-establishment thinkers and fringe scientists. He spoke with absolute conviction, standing beside his whirring contraption like it was a gift from the future. His charisma made people forget the laws of thermodynamics, or at least question them. Some followers were so convinced, they poured their savings into supporting him. But when pressed for consistent, scalable results, Newman dodged specifics and shifted blame. What was pitched as a breakthrough started to look more like a sideshow. But time exposed the machine for what it was: a noisy, oversized magnet that made grand promises and never delivered. Newman's machine never powered a home, a town, or even a toaster. Still, it captured the spirit of a decade desperate for energy alternatives and tired of institutional control. A symbol of rebellion, built on empty promises. Microsoft Bob was not a person, but it sure tried to act like one. Introduced in the mid-1990s, Bob was supposed to make computers friendlier for beginners. Instead, it made them unbearable. The idea was to turn your screen into a cartoon house, complete with a golden retriever assistant and rooms you had to click through to find your apps. It was like playing a game you never asked to play, just to open your word processor. Bob smiled a lot. He asked if you needed help. He was the digital neighbor no one invited. Microsoft thought people wanted personality in their software. What they actually wanted was speed and simplicity. Bob was clunky, slow, and too cutesy for its own good. It turned every basic task into an awkward journey through fake furniture and talking clipboards. And it required more processing power than most home computers could handle. That was the final nail. Bob vanished quietly after a year, never to be heard from again, except maybe in those late-night YouTube lists of tech fails. Microsoft learned its lesson eventually. They gave us Clippy a few years later, and somehow even Clippy made more sense. Bob was not just a failure, it was a reminder that good intentions do not always make good software. Sometimes less really is more. Okay. Electric carving knives were once the most anticipated gift on a wedding registry. These buzzing blades of the future turned Sunday roasts and Thanksgiving turkeys into effortless feasts, or so the ads claimed. Every family had one, and every family had a story about using it exactly once. Loud, clunky, and corded, they felt more like a power tool than a kitchen utensil. You had to grip it with two hands and guide it like a jackhammer through even the softest meat. The serrated blades rattled your bones, and the results were rarely prettier than what a good kitchen knife could do in half the time. Still, there was a certain pride in pulling one out during holidays, like showing off your latest gadget. But most ended up buried in drawers, their long plastic cases gathering dust next to outdated cookbooks and tangled cords. Over time, people realized that finesse mattered more than noise, that a well-sharpened blade required no electricity and delivered far better slices. The electric knife, once a symbol of futuristic kitchens, became a relic of overcomplication. It was kitchen flair without the function. But if you ever hear that distinctive hum during Thanksgiving, you will know someone, somewhere, is still chasing the dream of slicing like a pro. Microsoft. Bob was what happened when you tried to make your computer feel like a cartoon, but it just made everything worse. Launched in 1995, this was supposed to be the future of user-friendly software. But instead of helping people navigate their desktops, Bob gave them a talking dog named Rover and a fake house full of clip art furniture. It looked more like a bad Saturday morning cartoon than a productivity tool. And that is not even the worst part. It was slow. It required way more computing power than most homes had at the time. And users? They were lost in the clutter. The interface was confusing, not comforting. What should have been a gentle handhold into the digital world felt more like an insult to your intelligence. Even Bill Gates has joked about it since. Microsoft pulled the plug fast, but not before the damage was done. Bob became a meme before memes were even a thing. It is remembered not for helping anyone, but for proving that even tech giants can have a cringe phase. And that talking dog? He made a comeback as the search assistant in early versions of Windows. But let's be honest, he was no smarter the second time around. The next food flop was almost cruel. It handed kids the dream of pizza night, then made them make it themselves. Hidden Valley Ranch pizza kits sounded like a great idea on paper. It was the 1980s, ranch dressing was having a moment, and pizza was the undisputed king of dinner tables. So why not bring them together in a do-it-yourself dinner kit for kids? The box came with everything: dough mix, ranch-flavored sauce, and powdered cheese. All you had to do was follow the steps. But that was the problem. Kids were too young to manage it, and parents were too busy to help. The ranch sauce was tangy to the point of sour, the crust baked unevenly, and the result never looked like the picture. Today, it is mostly remembered by food historians and people who still cringe at the smell of ranch powder in a hot oven. But while this kit was a failure in kitchens, do you remember the sweet-smelling school supply that never actually worked? Let us talk about rubber-scented erasers shaped like food. You knew it was going to be a good school year when your pencil case smelled like a fruit salad. Rubber-scented erasers shaped like food were the peak of academic excitement in the 1980s. They looked like tiny hamburgers, donuts, pickles, even sushi rolls. If you were lucky, your set came with a tiny tray and a fake soda. They were bright, colorful, and smelled like someone spilled a bottle of air freshener in an art supply store. Only problem? They did not actually erase anything. If anything, they left behind more streaks than they removed. Still, no one really used them. You displayed them, you traded them, you clutched them like they were gold. And every now and then, someone tried to eat one just to see what would happen. It was childhood logic at its finest. If it smells like a strawberry milkshake, it must taste like one too, right? Wrong. But what these erasers lacked in function, they made up for in flair. They were tiny scented trophies of your youth. And while they never helped you pass math, they sure looked good on your desk. Speaking of things that looked great on the surface but did not last, let us hit play on a sound that defined a decade and then disappeared overnight. Muscle pants for kids, that was the pitch. Somewhere, a grown-up looked at a child and said, "You know what this kid needs? Pants that scream steroid energy." These were Zubaz-style leggings with wild patterns and stretch material designed to mimic the bodybuilding look of adult gym rats. Except they were made for children. The problem was not just the patterns, which, by the way, included everything from neon zebra stripes to camouflage lightning bolts. It was that kids had no idea how to wear them. The pants were often too tight or too loose, and they came with this weird fake athletic vibe that clashed hard with the Sesame Street lunchboxes. These pants were a hard no. Schools started quietly banning them for being distracting, and parents got tired of explaining to teachers that no, their child was not training for a junior weightlifting championship. They were just victims of 1980s fashion. The trend came and went faster than you could say bicep curl. But speaking of trying too hard to look futuristic, the floppy disk, a cornerstone of early personal computing, emerged in the late 1960s, symbolizing the first foray into portable digital storage. When the 3.5-inch floppy was introduced, many pondered, who would ever need that much storage? A notion that now elicits a chuckle in our gigabyte-saturated age. The act of inserting a floppy disk, accompanied by its characteristic click, defined an era of computing in the 80s and 90s. Despite its obsolescence due to advancing storage technologies, the floppy disk endures in the digital lexicon, immortalized as the universal save file icon. This subtle homage serves as a nostalgic reminder of the disk's pivotal role in the evolution of data storage and management. The commercials were insane, giant fruit crashing down on people's heads as they chewed candy and grinned like maniacs. Bonkers. Fruit chews were a direct attack on boring snacks. Each piece had a tangy outer shell and a soft fruity inside. They were fun to say, fun to eat, and perfectly engineered for the 1980s sugar rush. You could find them everywhere: convenience stores, lunch lines, corner stores with sticky floors. Then one day they were gone. No farewell, no explanation. Just gone. Some say the flavors were too bold. Others say the market shifted toward more subtle, health-conscious candy. Either way, bonkers was a casualty of changing times. What made it great, its ridiculousness, was also what made it unsustainable. You will not find bonkers in stores today. But if you mention them to the right person, you will see their eyes widen. They will smile and say something like, "I forgot all about those." And for a moment, they will be back in the world of neon shoelaces and arcades, gripping a candy that made no sense but all the difference. Bonkers did not just vanish. It exploded and left a gap nothing ever quite filled. Harvest Gold was never meant to be subtle. It was loud, it was proud, and for one strange decade, it coated every surface of the American kitchen. Paired with avocado green or orange, it was not just a color, it was a statement. You would find it on fridges, ovens, mixers, even your mom's favorite Tupperware. Advertisements promised it would bring warmth and cheer. But step into a Harvest Gold kitchen today, and it feels less like nostalgia and more like stepping inside a mustard bottle. The brightness that once felt cheerful began to feel aggressive, like a room that never let you relax. It faded fast, stained easily, and always seemed to clash with whatever came after. Like avocado green, it was an attempt to blend nature and futurism, and it failed at both. Once natural light hit a Harvest Gold refrigerator, the whole room seemed to glow with the hue of old mustard. Families tried to modernize around it, but nothing could mute the glare. And when the 80s arrived with chrome and pastels, Harvest Gold became the aesthetic equivalent of showing up in bell-bottoms to a wedding. Still, at least it stayed in its own space. If you have ever seen a car and thought, "This needs more fins, chrome, and maybe a rocket engine," then General Motors had your back in 1959 with the Firebird 3. It pushed its weird legacy into the 1960s, and boy, did it push hard. This thing looked like a jet fighter got stuck halfway through transforming into a convertible. It had 7 fins, a clear bubble cockpit, and joystick controls. Yes, a joystick, no steering wheel. The idea was to let drivers feel like pilots. They even threw in an onboard computer named UniControl that would help manage the car's systems. But here is the kicker. This spaceship on wheels never left the showroom. The tech was laughably overcomplicated for its time. The joystick was hard to control. The computer? Basically just blinking lights and a fancy name. No one could actually drive it safely, and the general public wanted something that could, fit in a parking spot. The Firebird 3 lived its entire life as a museum piece, a rolling prop from a future that never arrived. Still, it looked cool. And back then, looking cool was half the battle. If only they put that much energy into something practical, like, say, communicating with someone across town. But as it turns out, even that was not so simple. Before there were golden arches on every corner, there was Burger Chef. A pioneer in the world of fast food, it once had more locations than McDonald's. Their secret? Innovation. Burger Chef introduced the concept of the combo meal. They had a kids' meal with a toy before Happy Meals even existed. Families loved it. The food was quick, the branding was fun, and the prices were unbeatable. The restaurants had a friendly charm. Low-key places where memories were made over paper-wrapped burgers and crinkle-cut fries. Some even had indoor playgrounds before that was the norm. But while they were busy inventing the future of fast food, McDonald's was perfecting it. Better marketing, better real estate, and a more aggressive expansion strategy slowly buried Burger Chef. Legal battles with McDonald's drained their energy and their pockets. Ownership changed hands, and with it, the identity of the brand. By the early 1980s, most Burger Chef locations were rebranded or closed. What had once been a playground of innovation was now a forgotten building with a different sign out front. And for those who grew up with it, the loss still stings. It was more than a burger. It was the place you begged your parents to stop at. The place with the paper crowns and the magic. Now it is just another fast food footnote. KB Toys was a staple of every shopping mall, tucked into a corner near the food court or next to the clothing stores you ignored as a kid. It was loud, packed to the ceiling with toys, and had just enough chaos to make your parents nervous. But for children in the 1990s, it was paradise. Unlike big box giants like Toys R Us, KB Toys felt scrappy and spontaneous. Every aisle had that treasure hunt energy. It was small enough to feel personal, but big enough to carry the latest action figures, Tamagotchis, and Nerf blasters. And then came the competition. Big retailers slashed prices. E-commerce started creeping in. KB's tight mall footprint became more of a curse than a charm. And when the economy stumbled in the early 2000s, so did the toy stores. They declared bankruptcy, came back, and then finally vanished altogether. For kids of that decade, KB Toys was not just a store. It was the main event after school or the grand prize for surviving a family outing. And when it disappeared, it took with it a little bit of magic. Toys still exist, sure, but they do not sit on a shelf calling your name the same way anymore. No, Ames did not pretend to be elegant. It did not offer fine dining or perfume counters, but it was ours. In towns with no fancy malls or upscale plazas, Ames stood tall. Its red sign was a banner of welcome. You went there when the kids needed backpacks, when the faucet broke, or when you just wanted to walk the aisles and feel normal. Ames was warm linoleum under your feet, soft lighting from humming fluorescents above, and the quiet assurance that you would find what you needed and afford it. Parents shopped there after long shifts. Grandparents stretched retirement checks just a little further with a sale on flannel sheets. There were no frills, but every visit mattered. Kids would beg for a toy, teens would flip through racks of jeans, and once in a while, everyone left with something unexpected. Ames was small-town survival in store form. But as retail competition tightened and corporate strategies faltered, Ames started to disappear. One store closed, then another. Whole regions were left without a replacement. The buildings lingered, ghostly and hollow. And for the families who once relied on them, it felt like being forgotten, not just as consumers, but as people. Why are the first to serve always the first to fall? The Ford Pinto was America's bargain ride with a deadly secret. Designed in 1971 to take on the flood of small imports, it was cheap, quick to market, and shockingly lethal. Underneath its compact frame hid a flawed gas tank design that could explode in rear-end collisions. But here's the real kicker. Ford knew. Documents later revealed that the company weighed the cost of human lives against the price of redesigning the car and decided it was cheaper to pay settlements. They even wrote it out in cold, clinical terms: cost per life, cost per recall, projected savings. The numbers were chilling, and the ethics were non-existent. Crash tests had revealed the issue well before the car went public, but executives pushed it through anyway. For years, the Pinto sat on driveways like any other car until the lawsuits started rolling in. It took public outrage and investigative journalism to force real change. The Pinto became infamous not just for its danger, but for the cold calculation behind it. Families bought it for its price, not knowing they were strapping themselves into a potential fireball. When stories of fiery crashes hit the news, the public outcry was immediate and furious. It became one of the first true scandals of consumer safety, ushering in government scrutiny and a new wave of regulations. The Pinto's legacy is one of betrayal, where affordability came with an unspoken cost. This was not just a bad car, it was a breach of trust that Americans never fully forgave. The Apple Newton was supposed to be your digital assistant. Instead, it became your very expensive paperweight. Released in the early 1990s, the Newton promised to take notes, schedule meetings, and recognize your handwriting. The problem? It barely understood anything you wrote. You could jot down "buy milk," and it might decide you meant "bug silk." People mocked it endlessly, especially after a famous cartoon made fun of the Newtons' glitchy handwriting recognition. It was also big, bulky, heavy, like a pocket computer that did not really fit in your pocket. Apple was ahead of its time, but the tech just was not there yet. The Newton ran out of battery life fast, cost several $100s, and crashed often. For early adopters, it was both exciting and exhausting. Apple quietly discontinued it after Steve Jobs returned to the company. He reportedly hated the idea. But even with all its flaws, the Newton walked so that later devices like the iPhone and iPad could run. It failed, yes, but it failed forward. Still, in the 1990s, it was one more product people bought with hope and returned with disappointment. Built-in wall coffee makers were supposed to be the final word in kitchen luxury. The idea was elegant: coffee at the press of a button, no more clutter on the countertop, no more messy grounds. They were sleek, space-saving, and made your kitchen feel like the inside of a first-class airplane. But once installed, reality came knocking. They leaked, they gurgled, they brewed lukewarm, watery coffee that tasted like disappointment. Cleaning them was a nightmare. The water reservoirs were hidden deep inside cabinetry, and mildew quickly became an uninvited guest. Repairing them meant calling in a specialist, an expensive proposition for a cup of bitter drip. Yet people were enchanted by the idea. They proudly showed off their built-in marvels to guests, even as they quietly brewed their actual coffee in a countertop machine out of sight. Over time, these units became silent relics in otherwise modern kitchens. Some still sit in old houses today, yellowed by age, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and outdated hope. They were supposed to make mornings better. Instead, they taught people to be careful what they wished for, because nothing is worse than needing coffee and being betrayed by the very machine you trusted to deliver it. Pump shoes made you feel like a superhero until you realized the pump did almost nothing. Released with wild hype in the early 1990s, these sneakers came with an inflatable pouch that let you pump up the tongue of your shoe for a customized fit. At least, that was the promise. What you actually got was a pair of sneakers that cost way too much and made you feel cool for about 5 minutes. Every kid wanted them. Every parent hesitated at the price tag. The commercials were loud, bold, and full of slam dunks. But on the playground, they were just another pair of shoes. The pump was more of a gimmick than a game changer. It gave the illusion of high-tech gear, but really it was just a plastic bubble that deflated your expectations. The hype wore off fast, and Reebok never quite recovered the same magic. Today, they live on as a nostalgic relic, worn ironically or remembered with a smirk. Because let's face it, if your shoes need air to work, maybe it is not the shoes that need fixing. The next idea came from a chain that was already famous, Pizza Hut, and they tried to go deep, thick, and Italian. It did not go well. The Piazzo from Pizza Hut was supposed to be a revelation, a deep dish, multi-layered Italian pie that combined all the decadence of lasagna with the branding power of pizza. Launched in the mid-1980s with television ads that felt more like opera promos than food commercials, the Piazzo came in a few varieties and was stuffed with layer upon layer of cheese, meats, and sauce. It took extra time to cook. It took extra time to eat. And it took very little time for customers to get tired of it. It was expensive for its time, hard to prep, and nearly impossible to deliver without becoming a mess. Pizza Hut quietly retired it, and today it lives on only through retro commercials and the rare person who insists it was underrated. But while the Piazzo failed by doing too much, skiing was never the same once neon showed up. I am talking full spectrum, retina-searing neon, electric pink, screaming lime green, safety cone orange, sometimes all at once. You were not skiing. You were glowing. The 1980s fashion scene decided subtlety was canceled, and nowhere was that more obvious than on the slopes. It was like someone dared the ski community to look like walking glow sticks, and they all said, "Challenge accepted." Ski suits looked like outer space met a Lisa Frank notebook. But here is the thing. When the snow settled, all that color had nowhere to go. Once the decade ended, People looked at their slope selfies and realized they had been dressing like traffic signs. Neon was everywhere for a hot minute. Even the zippers had attitude. And if you were not blinded by your jacket, then someone else's was probably reflecting directly into your eyes. That was not just fashion, it was a safety hazard. But at least you had room to move, right? Speaking of movement, the next 1980s trend thought bouncing was the future of fitness and fun, and totally not sprained ankles. Now let us move from mind control to media meltdown with a television icon who could not quite make the jump from cool to coherent. Max Headroom was supposed to be the future, a computer-generated, sarcastic television host who stuttered stylishly and wore sunglasses at night. He was the face of a dystopian digital world, equal parts cyberpunk icon and artificial intelligence with an attitude. Advertisers loved him, especially soda companies. So someone had the bright idea, let us give him a full television series. What could possibly go wrong? Everything. The Max Headroom show was visually interesting but narratively confusing. It tried to blend science fiction with satire, wrapped in glitchy editing and background noise. Most of the time, you were not sure if the show was broken or just being artsy. The plotline featured underground hackers, corrupt corporations, and a bleak media landscape, which ironically kind of predicted the internet. And Max, once a futuristic face of advertising, became more of a trivia answer at bar night. Still, his influence stuck around in weird ways. You can spot traces of Max Headroom in everything from video game villains to pop music videos. Before digital streaming platforms like Spotify, the audio cassette reigned supreme, offering a personal touch to music curation through the creation of mixtapes. Philips launched this innovative format in the 1960s, transforming cassettes into powerful means of expression beyond mere songs. Despite being overshadowed by CDs and MP3s, cassettes have seen a revival among those nostalgic for a tangible music experience. Mixtapes, meticulously assembled, symbolized affection and personal milestones, embodying the art of sharing music intimately. The ritual of rewinding tapes may have faded, but the essence of mixtapes endures, evoking a bygone era where music sharing was a thoughtful, personal gesture. Today, the audio cassette remains a beloved relic, celebrated for its role in crafting heartfelt musical narratives. It was not just dessert, it was dinner backup. The chocolate chip snackin' cake was a box mix from Betty Crocker that promised an all-in-one solution. Just add water, stir, and bake. What came out was a rich, moist cake dotted with chocolate chips, perfectly sized for kids coming home hungry. It was a staple of after-school snacking. You did not need frosting. You did not need effort. Just a pan and an oven and 30 minutes. Moms loved it. Kids devoured it. And for a time in the 1980s, it felt like this little secret weapon in the pantry. But times changed. Cake mixes lost their allure. Pre-packaged snacks took over. Microwavable treats and pre-sliced desserts made the humble snackin' cake look old-fashioned. It quietly disappeared from shelves. People did not even notice at first, but when they did, it hurt. It felt like losing a family tradition you never meant to abandon. The kind of snack that was made, not bought. A little slice of normal that told you everything was okay. Chocolate chip snack and cake is gone. But the memory of warm kitchens and crumbs on napkins, that still lingers. The kitchen was the heart of the 1970s home, and avocado green was its crown jewel. At least, that is what the designers claimed. Appliances from toasters to refrigerators were coated in this earthy green, a color meant to feel natural and calming. But instead of evoking gardens and freshness, it often made kitchens feel dim, claustrophobic, and permanently stuck in the past. Imagine walking into a kitchen where every appliance matches the color of an overripe avocado. At the time, it felt sleek, stylish. But once that color started to fade, or clash with updated counters and cabinets, it became painfully clear that avocado green was never going to age gracefully. What once felt trendy now felt like a permanent bad decision baked into your kitchen. As tastes shifted toward lighter, brighter spaces, avocado green quickly became a design cliché. By the time the 1980s rolled in with its love for chrome and white laminate, avocado green kitchens became the punchline to a joke about bad design choices. Today, they serve as a visual reminder that what is trendy now might become embarrassing later. But green was not the only color we overcommitted to. There was another hue that infiltrated every home and overstayed its welcome, especially underfoot. So imagine this. It is 1961, and you are cruising down the road in what looks like a spaceship on two wheels. That was the dream Ford tried to sell with the Gyron. It was a futuristic concept car that did away with four wheels entirely. Instead, it balanced on just two, using a gyroscope, yes, like the kind in science fiction movies. There were no pedals, no steering wheel, and barely any chance you would be able to drive it. But man, did it look cool. The body was sleek, all sharp angles and bubble domes, and it screamed speed even though it never actually hit the highway. Ford hyped it up big at car shows, but behind the curtains everyone knew it was all show and no go. The technology just was not there. The gyroscope was hard to manage, and the car itself was so unstable it needed little kickstands when parked. It never made it past the showroom floor. The original prototype? Destroyed in a fire. The Gyron did not just fail, it vanished. But that did not stop companies from continuing their obsession with the future. In fact, the very next year, one of them tried to bring the future into your living room. You just needed an extra $1,000 and a lot of patience. Do you remember when flying felt like something out of a movie? Pan American World Airways, or Pan Am, was not just a way to get from one place to another. It was an experience, one you dressed up for, one that made you feel like the world was opening up. Their blue logo was instantly recognizable, their stewardesses were style icons, and their international routes were unmatched. It was the airline that brought jet-setting into American vocabulary. But behind the glamour, things were starting to slip. Rising fuel costs, government deregulation, and one financial misstep after another slowly chipped away at what was once an empire in the sky. By the time the 1990s rolled around, Pan Am was on life support. Even a last-ditch attempt to rebrand with a new focus on affordability could not save it. The 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, was a final blow, emotional, financial, and reputational. The company folded not long after, its assets scattered, its story over. For many, it marked the end of an era. Today, people still look at old Pan Am ads and ticket stubs and feel something. Not just nostalgia, but loss. We thought it would always be there, gliding above the clouds, reminding us of what travel could be. And then, suddenly, it wasn't. JNCO jeans were absolutely wild. You did not wear JNCOs so much as announce them. With legs so wide you could lose a whole lunchbox in there, they were anti-fashion in the loudest way possible. But for a moment in the 1990s, they were everything. They represented rebellion, freedom, and a deep distrust of any adult who said, "You're going out in that?" From skaters to ravers, JNCOs were a badge of honor. They were like walking protest signs, against norms, against structure, against anything tight-fitting or preppy. The back pockets were the size of pillowcases, and the stitching often featured fire-breathing skulls or graffiti-style logos. You could spot a JNCO wearer from a block away, and that was the whole point. These jeans were never meant to blend in. They were made to stomp through conformity like a parade. The problem? They were built for a moment, not a movement. As fashion shifted to sleeker silhouettes, nobody wanted to be seen swimming in denim anymore. JNCO tried to relaunch, but the vibe was gone. You cannot manufacture a subculture that no longer exists. What made JNCO work was the chaos. And once the chaos calmed down, so did the desire to wear jeans big enough to parachute with. Still, for a few brief years, if your pants didn't drag across half the street, you were doing it wrong. Strawbridge and Clothier was not just a store, it was Philadelphia royalty. When you walked through its grand doors, you felt like you were stepping into a chapter of history. Everything from the marbled floors to the stately columns whispered of another era. It was refinement without arrogance, tradition without snobbery. In the 70s, it managed the impossible, holding on to old-world charm while adapting to suburban sprawl. The stores outside the city had just as much grace as the flagship downtown. Strawbridge and Clothier was a place where school uniforms were bought, wedding gifts were chosen, and Christmas shopping became a ritual. Salespeople wore suits. Packaging was elegant. It was an experience, not just a transaction. But time caught up, and slowly, that air of dignity was replaced by the hum of sameness. Mergers, rebrands, closures. And one day, you looked around and realized the grand old name was nowhere to be found. What happens when we lose the places that taught us how to carry ourselves? Betamax was not just a video format, it was a casualty in one of the fiercest tech wars of the 20th century. When Sony released it in 1975, they were convinced it was unbeatable. Better resolution, superior sound, and a sleek design made it the darling of tech enthusiasts. But Sony made a critical mistake. They kept the recording time short and the licensing tight. Meanwhile, their rival, VHS, gave the people what they wanted: longer recording times, cheaper players, and a library of tapes that just kept growing. Sony insisted quality would win out, ignoring the simple truth that people wanted convenience. Blockbuster and rental stores started filling up with VHS titles, leaving Betamax shelves nearly bare. The market turned quickly, and once families committed to a format, they stuck with it. Even professional studios who favored Betamax eventually caved to demand. It became a rare case where the better product lost the war simply because it refused to adapt. Soon, Betamax became the symbol of a brilliant idea that forgot to listen to its audience. It found fans in niche markets and broadcast studios, but for everyday Americans flipping through tapes at the video store, Betamax was just the weird one. As VHS took over living rooms across the country, Betamax faded into a technological ghost, outperformed, outpriced, and outloved. Sony clung to it for years, refusing to admit defeat. But by the time they let go, the world had already moved on. A sharper picture meant nothing if no one was watching. The Arch Deluxe was McDonald's way of saying, "Hey adults, fast food can be fancy too." They wanted a premium burger, something with dignity. This was not for kids with Happy Meals. It had a sesame seed bun with a little more flair, lettuce that looked like it came from a farmer's market, and a Dijon mustard sauce that tried so hard to feel gourmet. McDonald's spent more than $100 million to convince Americans this burger was worth growing up for, but no one was buying it. The taste was fine, the look was passable, but the vibe? The vibe was all wrong. People go to McDonald's for speed, convenience, and comfort food, not to feel like they're ordering from a country club snack bar. The Arch Deluxe wanted to be a bridge between fast food and fine dining, but it fell flat somewhere in the middle. It was too expensive for a drive-through indulgence and too familiar to be premium. Kids didn't want it. Adults didn't want it. It was a burger without a home. McDonald's quietly pulled it off the menu, but not before the entire nation saw them try and fail to redefine what a burger should be. It remains one of the most expensive flops in fast food history. Sometimes a burger is just a burger, and no sauce, no matter how grown up, can change that. Combination washer-dryer units sounded like the answer to every homemaker's prayers. One machine, one cycle, dirty to dry without needing to transfer a thing. It was the kind of solution that made magazine covers and won over appliance showrooms. But in practice, it was a whole different story. These early units were unreliable, took ages to run a full load, and often left clothes damp or steaming but not quite dry. Worse, if the washer broke, you lost your dryer too, and vice versa. Repairs were tricky, parts were rare, and service calls were expensive. Households quickly learned the hard truth. Just because two things can be combined does not mean they should be. Still, in a post-war world obsessed with space saving and streamlining, these machines symbolized a sleek, modern lifestyle. Apartment dwellers in particular clung to the dream, grateful for anything that spared them the laundromat. But frustration set in fast. Eventually, Many people went back to the old two-machine method, realizing that reliability beat innovation every time. The combo washer-dryer promised convenience, but delivered compromise. And while today's versions are far more efficient, those early units left a damp impression on everyone who owned one. The Beanie Baby trading market was not just a fad. It was a full-blown cultural fever. Kids were hooked, parents were obsessed, and collectors, they were convinced they had struck gold. These soft, wide-eyed plush toys felt like limited edition lottery tickets in stuffed animal form. Prices skyrocketed. People were keeping them in plastic cases, refusing to let their children play with them. For a while, it really did feel like Beanie Babies were going to fund college tuition. But by the late 1990s, the bubble burst. The market collapsed under its own weight. The internet made it clear supply was not nearly as limited as people believed. What was once worth hundreds of dollars now barely fetched $5 at garage sales. The dream was over, and for many it ended in disappointment and storage bins packed with regret. Beanie Babies were a lesson in hype, herd mentality, and the danger of thinking toys are an investment strategy. They were cute, sure, but they were not gold. And once the magic wore off, they became a soft, cuddly reminder that not everything rare is valuable. The next food disaster tried to repackage something old, chocolate pudding, and managed to turn it into a sticky, chewy nightmare. Pudding roll-ups were proof that not everything needs to be flattened, dried, and turned into a fruit snack. Created by Betty Crocker during the height of the fruit leather craze, these chocolate-flavored strips aimed to deliver the taste of pudding in a portable, no-mess format. What they delivered was confusion. The texture was somewhere between tire rubber and wax paper. The taste was faintly chocolate-like, but mostly bland and chemical. Kids who expected dessert got disappointment. The roll-ups stuck to your teeth, your fingers, and the plastic they came in. Parents who packed them once rarely did again. They were marketed with excitement. Commercials promised fun, convenience, and the rich taste of pudding. But no one was fooled for long. Sales dropped. The product vanished. And today it lives on as one of those food ideas that sounds like a dare in hindsight. It came with a can of hairspray, a comb, and enough height to qualify as a fire hazard. There are hairstyles, and then there are structural engineering projects. Gravity-defying bangs, held aloft by industrial-strength hairspray, were the crown jewels of 1980s style. We are talking sky-high, shellacked to perfection, immovable bangs that could survive a hurricane. You did not just style your hair, you sculpted it. And the glue that held it all together? A can of Aquanet, the unofficial perfume of the decade. One spritz was never enough. You held that button down until the room filled with fog and your lungs begged for mercy. It was how you knew your bangs were officially done. They had to crunch when you tapped them. These bangs had volume, attitude, and possibly their own zip code. They required teasing, patience, and a total disregard for the ozone layer. Parents disapproved. Schools banned combs in lockers. But if your bangs did not touch the ceiling of your school photo backdrop, were you even living? It was extreme. It was ridiculous. And it was glorious. But eventually, the sky-high trend lost steam, and pastel blazers tried to take over the fashion throne. Spoiler alert, not everyone could pull off Crockett from Miami Vice. Just wait until we revisit one of the most dangerous playground toys to ever roll out of a toy aisle. Spoiler, it has no handles, no brakes, and absolutely no chill. Imagine a pogo stick and a balance board had a baby, and then forgot to teach it physics. That was the pogo ball, also known as the Lolo ball, and it was one of the hottest toy trends of the 1980s. It looked like a rubber volleyball stuck inside a plastic disc, and the goal was simple. Stand on it and bounce. No handlebars, no foot straps, no guidance. Just you, your ankles, and a prayer. The commercials made it look effortless. Kids soaring through the air, spinning in place, landing cleanly like Olympic gymnasts. But in reality, most kids got 3 hops in before face planting into the pavement. Maybe it was the challenge. Or maybe we just liked pretending we had a shot at being the first pogo ball pro athlete. Either way, the toy quietly disappeared after too many accident-prone afternoons. It went from next big thing to garage sale classic almost overnight. And if that product made no sense, long before texting and swiping, there was the thrill of spinning a rotary dial or the sharp click of a push-button phone. Invented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, the landline phone was the cornerstone of communication. These phones were built like tanks, and hanging up with a slam was its own kind of satisfaction. As cell phones began to dominate in the late 20th century, the once ubiquitous landline started its slow retreat. Yet, in some homes, the landline lives on, a reminder of simpler, more connected times. Remember when phone numbers started with words? Call KL55555, a testament to a time when phone numbers were a jingle, not just a sequence. Peanut butter fans thought they had found heaven. PB Max was chunky, messy, and unapologetically loud. A thick slab of peanut butter on a cookie base, all drenched in milk chocolate. It had all the makings of a legend. And for a short while in the late 1980s and early 1990s, it was just that. You would see it in gas stations, in vending machines, in your friend's lunch. It stood out from the crowd. It tasted like rebellion. But then, like a cruel trick, PB Max disappeared. People wrote letters, sent complaints, asked where it went. The answer? Mars executives apparently just did not like peanut butter. That was it. That was the reason. The product was successful, profitable, and beloved. But it did not match the personal taste of the family behind the company. So they pulled the plug, just like that. No announcement, no farewell tour, just silence. It is the kind of decision that makes you realize how fragile even your favorites are. PB Max did not fail because people stopped loving it. It failed because someone decided it did not deserve to exist. And in that, there is something deeply upsetting. A snack that won hearts, but not boardrooms. Or the mood of a dark, cramped house, quite like what was hanging on the walls. Wood paneling was everywhere in the 1970s. It made your living room look like a den, your den look like a hunting lodge, and your basement look like a forgotten back room at a roadside bar. At first, it felt warm and cozy. Rich brown tones, faux wood grain, maybe even a little glossy finish if you were lucky. But there was a problem. Most of it was not real wood. It was thin, pressed panels with a printed veneer. It dented easily, warped when damp, and turned rooms into narrow, lightless boxes. The illusion of natural wood faded fast when corners started peeling and warping with moisture. What was meant to bring a rustic touch ended up feeling cheap and oppressive. Once a sign of stylish Americana, it aged into a symbol of dated taste. The worst part? You could not just paint over it. People spent entire weekends trying to rip the stuff down or cover it with drywall. Today, retro renovators might leave a single accent wall for nostalgia, but most of us remember wood paneling for what it truly was: fake, dark, and way too committed to its own aesthetic. And when the wall started closing in, families turned to high-tech solutions to feel connected inside the home. Unfortunately, those did not age much better. So let us talk about telex car phones, the early kind. These were supposed to be the peak of convenience, your own private phone line inside your car. Sounds slick, right? Except using one felt like yelling into a toaster that barely heard you. The equipment alone took up half your trunk, with clunky transceivers and roof antennas that made your car look like a spy van. You would pick up the phone, wait for a signal, and then shout into the handset while everyone in traffic stared at you like you were calling from the moon. Reception? Spotty on the best of days. Dropouts were constant, and unless you were in the middle of a major city, the odds of actually getting through were slim to none. Add to that the price tag, which could run higher than the car itself, and it becomes pretty clear why telex car phones never caught on. Not to mention, you had zero privacy. People in the next lane could hear your entire conversation. It was supposed to be the future, but it felt more like a prank. Still, if we are talking about future flops, nothing tops the brief moment in time where Hertz thought regular folks might fly to work, In the 1980s, if you were not wearing Nike, you were probably wearing LA Gear. The brand was flash, neon colors, high tops with see-through soles, glitter on some models. They were sneakers that shouted, and they found fans fast, especially among kids and teens. They looked like something a pop star would wear on stage. And that was no accident. LA Gear poured money into celebrity endorsements, from Paula Abdul to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The shoes were everywhere. It felt like every mall window, every magazine ad, and every teen drama had someone rocking LA Gear. For a brief moment, it was not just a brand. It was the pulse of youth culture. But here is the thing about fashion. It moves fast. Too fast for a brand that built its entire identity on being trendy. LA Gear could not figure out what it wanted to be next. The designs became over the top. Stores started marking them down. The cool factor evaporated. And just like that, the empire began to crumble. By the 1990s, LA Gear was being sold in discount outlets. Today, you might spot a pair in the back of someone's closet, but they are mostly forgotten. At its height, LA Gear made you feel like you were part of something loud and exciting. Now, it is a quiet reminder that style always comes with a countdown. Delia's catalog was not just a fashion catalog, it was a lifeline. For teen girls in the 1990s, it arrived in the mailbox like a handwritten invitation to coolness. Chunky shoes, plaid skirts, glitter lip gloss, Delia's had it all. And it spoke in a language kids actually understood. Every page felt like a secret glimpse into a better version of yourself. The models looked like the girls you went to school with, just a little more polished, a little more confident. You did not just want the clothes, you wanted the life that came with them. And for a few dollars and a phone call, it felt almost possible. It was cheeky, clever, and full of attitude, way before that became the norm. Shopping malls were still dominant, but Delia's gave you something else, a sense of independence. You could browse from your bedroom, circle what you liked, and dream. But trends are cruel. As fast fashion chains took over and the internet made catalogs feel ancient, Delia's struggled to keep up. They opened brick-and-mortar stores, but the magic was in the mail. And without that charm, it lost its edge. The catalog stopped coming, and with it, a generation quietly said goodbye to the style guide of their adolescence. Caldor was quiet confidence, a discount store with taste. It never screamed at you with neon signs or carnival-like sales. Instead, it offered value in a calm, dignified way. Walk through the doors, and everything felt in order. The layout was smart, the prices were fair, the brands surprisingly good. For families in the Northeast, Caldor was the go-to for almost everything. You could buy a warm winter coat and matching mittens, pick up light bulbs, and browse the electronics aisle, all without fighting through chaos. Caldor was where fathers bought toolkits they actually used, and mothers found tasteful decor that did not cost a paycheck. Kids loved the toy aisle, bright, clean, and just adventurous enough. The clerks knew the regulars. You could ask questions and get real answers. It felt like shopping for adults, honest and efficient. But then came the tidal wave. Big box superstores with deeper discounts and endless inventory. Walmart, Target, the giants. And slowly, Caldor's calm faded under pressure. Budgets tightened, shelves thinned, and eventually the chain folded. The sign came down, the lights turned off, and the neighborhoods it served were left with louder, colder options. Caldor may not have had a catchphrase or a commercial jingle, but it had heart. And that was more than enough. Why does dignity always seem to lose in the age of excess? It was a flying car that looked like a daredevil's fever dream. The AVE Mizar fused a Ford Pinto with the wings and tail of a Cessna Skymaster, because apparently one death trap needed another. Born in 1973, this Frankenstein of the skies was pitched as the future of travel for average families. Forget long drives or expensive plane tickets. Just park your Pinto, bolt on the wings, and off you go. People imagined themselves soaring above traffic, skipping morning commutes, and finally owning the future they had only seen in comic books. The dream sold well enough that real investors stepped in, and actual flight tests were scheduled with cameras rolling. but whispers of instability, balance issues, and flawed engineering began to circulate among insiders. Still, there was too much money and ego on the line to stop. By the time anyone admitted something was wrong, it was far too late. It sounds charmingly ridiculous today, but at the time, it was marketed as innovation incarnate. The problem was, it never really flew, not safely at least. On its final demonstration flight, the right wing strut detached. The whole aircraft spiraled into the ground, killing both the inventor and his pilot. The tragedy brought a swift, brutal end to what many considered one of the most daring inventions of the decade. And just like that, the dream of a flying family car was grounded for good. The AVE Mizar remains a symbol of what happens when ambition skips safety, and the price we pay for chasing something that should have never left the runway. Earring magic. Ken was a Barbie doll accessory turned cultural controversy that no one at Mattel saw coming. Released in 1993, this version of Ken came with a lavender mesh shirt, a leather vest, bleached hair, and, most notably, a necklace that looked an awful lot like a piece of adult jewelry worn in certain circles. Mattel said it was just a ring on a chain. Critics, comedians, and most of the internet disagreed. The fashion world had a field day. Late-night television could not stop talking about it. Parents were confused. Kids were just trying to play. Ken had never been so edgy or so unintentionally controversial. Sales actually went through the roof at first. Then Mattel pulled the doll from shelves without a word. It became a collector's item almost overnight. But the bigger story was how one plastic doll sparked a national conversation about representation, identity, and what happens when corporations try to be trendy without understanding the trend. Earring magic. Ken was a doll, sure, but it was also a moment, a very 1990s moment. The kind you remember not because it worked, but because it absolutely did not. The Toast-O-Later was one of those appliances that promised to revolutionize breakfast forever. The conveyor belt design made it feel like you were living in the future, right in your own kitchen. Just place your bread on one side, and it would slowly glide through to the other, warm and golden. Except, more often than not, it came out burnt, limp, or not toasted at all. The mechanism jammed constantly, the heating elements were unpredictable, and the thing would overheat after a single use. In an era where innovation felt patriotic, people forgave a lot. But the truth is, it quickly became a hassle no one wanted to deal with before coffee. Still, it sat proudly on the counter, humming along with its cheerful chrome glow, because it represented something bigger: hope, style, progress. It was less a toaster and more a monument to mid-century optimism. That optimism eventually wore out, just like its motor, and the Toast-O-Later found its way to yard sales, attic corners, and nostalgic memory. But ask anyone who had one. They will not forget the sound of it, the smell of it, or the feeling that for a moment their kitchen was a little ahead of its time. Orbit soda looked like someone bottled up a lava lamp and decided to call it a drink. Released in the late 1990s, it was a clear, fruit-flavored beverage filled with floating gelatin balls. Yes, balls. Just sitting there, suspended like alien eggs. The drink did not need shaking. In fact, it told you not to. But every sip felt like a dare. It was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be futuristic. Instead, it was just weird. Orbits came in bright bottles with science fiction-style fonts and flavor names like vanilla orange and pineapple banana cherry coconut. But it did not matter what flavor you picked. They all tasted like cough syrup, with texture. This drink was not refreshing. It was an experience, and not a good one. It barely lasted a year in stores before quietly vanishing from shelves, never to be spoken of again, except by those brave enough to remember it. Every decade has its strange food experiments, but Orbits might be one of the strangest. It tried to be ahead of its time, but all it did was leave people asking, why? Frito-Lay Tato skins were supposed to feel like an upgrade, thicker, richer, and more satisfying than your average potato chip. Made with real potato skins, they promised something heartier, a kind of bar snack you could take home. The idea worked at first. The packaging was bold, the flavors were savory, and people were curious. But the taste was flat. They were oddly dry and had a strange aftertaste. Some flavors like bacon and cheddar overwhelmed the palate, while others like ranch barely registered. They crumbled in the bag. The texture felt stale even when they were fresh. And despite the name, they did not remind anyone of actual potato skins. Sales lagged, then plummeted. Frito-Lay pulled the product, and though other brands tried to revive the idea, none lasted. Today, potato skins are remembered mostly by people who bought them once and never again. Before cell phones, there were landlines. And before minimalism, there were designer phone covers. And boy, did the 1980s go all in. You could not just have a phone, you had to dress it. We are talking fur-lined receivers, leopard print handsets, and rhinestone-covered cradles. Nothing screamed glamour, like trying to have a conversation with what looked like a bedazzled chinchilla pressed against your ear. There was even one that looked like a hamburger. Why? No one really knows. But the 1980s were not about asking why. They were about asking, does this come in glitter pink? People wanted their rotary phones to match their shag carpet and floral wallpaper, and these accessories delivered poorly. The covers fell apart. They muffled the sound. And let us be honest, no emergency call was improved by digging through a layer of sequins. It turned something simple into a full-time job. You had to prepare to use your phone. The trend eventually fizzled out, mostly because the novelty wore off and the practicality never existed in the first place. Still, the 1980s loved their flair, especially when you could wear it, like, say, around your neck in the most jingly way possible. And speaking of odd inventions that had their moment before quietly disappearing, let us talk about the time schools had to ban a certain wrist gadget that made kids feel like geniuses. There was a brief, glorious moment in the 1980s when being a math nerd actually made you cool, and that was all thanks to the digital calculator watch. You could do basic math right on your wrist. Addition, subtraction, maybe a little division if you were feeling wild. These watches were sleek, futuristic, and they gave kids the illusion of being a young computer genius. But the novelty wore off faster than a sticker on a locker. Teachers banned them from classrooms almost instantly. Kids were using them to cheat on math tests or just to show off during spelling bees. Parents got tired of replacing batteries, and school administrators were not thrilled with little kids clicking away during morning announcements. Plus, if you had even slightly chubby fingers, good luck hitting the right button. It was a gadget that promised convenience, but delivered mostly frustration and a few detention slips. And while that fad disappeared into backpacks and sock drawers, another 1980s product was trying way too hard to sell itself with big names and bigger commercials. Once a beacon of connectivity, the payphone stood as a testament to public communication. Scattered across urban and rural landscapes, they offered a lifeline, a portal to distant voices. Indeed, finding a forgotten quarter in the coin return slot felt akin to winning the lottery, a small urban treasure hunt that could brighten any day. As cell phones became our constant companions, the need for these metal guardians waned, and they vanished from our streets. Yet, their iconic image lives on in movies and memories, a relic of a time when staying in touch meant a pocket full of coins and a booth around the corner. Before Pop-Tarts ruled the toaster, there were Danish go-rounds, a rolled-up pastry, spiraled with fruit filling, made to pop right out of the toaster and into your hand. It was flaky, it was warm, and it was easy. Kellogg's launched them in the late 1960s, but they reached their peak in the 1980s when toaster pastries became an American breakfast ritual. But something about them never fully stuck. Maybe it was the shape, less neat than a Pop-Tart. Maybe it was the taste, more delicate, less sugary. Whatever it was, Danish go-rounds slowly vanished. Pop-Tarts became the juggernaut. Shelf space shrunk, and the go-round was quietly retired. Kids barely noticed. Parents moved on. But years later, people still talk about them, about that flaky crust, that swirl of fruit, that sense that breakfast did not always have to come in a rectangle. You will not find them in stores. And Kellogg's has never hinted at a comeback. They remain frozen in memory, part of a past where innovation looked like a spiral, not a square. A better taste? Maybe, but not a better fit for the machine. It came in short, stubby containers. The texture was smooth, velvety, and rich. Not like the runny stuff most people associated with yogurt. This was custard style, creamy, decadent, almost dessert. If you lived through the 1970s, you remember the feel of it between your toes. Shag carpeting was more than a design choice. It was a movement. Bold colors, thick fibers, and the kind of plush softness that made you want to lie down and never get up. From mustard yellows to burnt oranges, it blanketed floors in every room, including bathrooms, which is an idea no one has really been able to explain. Shag was fun and funky, but it was also a magnet for everything you never wanted in your house. Dust, dirt, pet hair, smells, and once it was in there, it stayed. Vacuuming was a chore. Deep cleaning was a nightmare. The very feature that made shag carpets so appealing, its thick, luxurious texture, was exactly what made it impossible to clean. People were not just pulling it up for new trends, they were trying to reclaim their air quality. What started as a symbol of comfort quickly became a maintenance disaster. Eventually, people tore it up in favor of cleaner, sleeker options. Shag rugs might have made a small comeback, but the wall-to-wall version? It is staying in the past, where it belongs. Of course, nothing trapped dust, but you know what still had people gathering around the television back then? A wild piece of gear that looked like it came straight off a flying saucer. The Philco Predicta. You remember that thing? That television set with the spinning head and the see-through shell that looked like it belonged in a Jetsons episode. It debuted in the late 1950s, but the last run of models pushed into the early 1960s, and by then it had one foot out the door. See, people bought the Predicta for the design. The space-age look, the swivel screen, the way it could sit on a pole or wall mount. It was a vibe. But what they got? Tubes that burned out constantly, finicky knobs, and a screen that would sometimes go blank just for the fun of it. Philco's idea was ahead of its time, no doubt. But it turns out no one really wants their television to look cool if it can barely hold a signal. Repair guys hated them. Parts were a nightmare. And while collectors might treasure them today, back then the Predicta's final models flopped so hard they helped tank the company. But hey, if your television was broken, you still had the stars to look forward to, or so you thought. America Online CDs were absolutely everywhere. Mailboxes, cereal boxes, even stuck inside magazines. They were impossible to escape. They promised a brand new future right at your fingertips with just a phone line and a bit of patience. And if you ever heard the dial-up tone, you already know it burned itself into your brain. America Online, or AOL, was the digital front porch of the 1990s. It gave millions their first email address, their first chat room crush, their first viral chain letter. And then, just like that, it started fading. Broadband showed up, and AOL's clunky all-in-one model could not keep up. The CDs kept coming for a while, but it was like shouting into a void. Eventually, they became a joke, something you'd turn into coasters or hang from your rearview mirror. AOL had built the bridge into the internet age, but it forgot to cross it. For a moment in time, though, it felt like the future was stamped onto every disk. Logging into AOL was not just about getting online, it was stepping into an entirely new world. And now, all that's left is the sound of 1,000 modems connecting. One last time. Montgomery Ward began as a lifeline, a bold promise that anyone, anywhere in the country, could share in the American dream. It started with the catalog, a book thick as a Bible, landing with a thud on farmhouse tables across the country. Children would pore over it, circling bicycles and toy trains. Mothers would dog-ear dresses and linens. Fathers eyed radios, tools, and gadgets. It brought the city to the country, hope in ink and staples. But when the company transitioned into physical stores, the dream expanded. By the 1970s, Montgomery Ward was a fixture in malls and shopping centers. It had everything, Furniture, clothes, appliances. A one-stop shop that respected your time and your paycheck. The red sign felt dependable, like a trusted neighbor. You knew it would be there next week, next year. Ward's wasn't flashy, but it was fair. It was honest. It stood for the solid middle class that powered the country. But the world changed. Flash won out over function. Competitors raced ahead with newer tech, slicker branding, and deeper pockets. And Montgomery Ward, practical, sturdy, kind, couldn't keep pace. The doors closed, the lights went dark, and all that remained were the catalogs in attics and the echoes in abandoned malls. Did we lose a store, or the part of ourselves that believed in building something slowly, steadily, and with care? The AMC Gremlin was supposed to be a hero of American thrift, bold, compact, and proudly different. What we got instead was a stubby little oddball with a name that practically begged for ridicule. Launched on April Fool's Day in 1970, it was meant to beat the foreign compacts flooding the market. But from the start, it looked off. The rear was chopped flat like someone ran out of budget midway through the blueprint. Inside, it felt like the engineers had been forced to improvise everything on the spot. Seats were uncomfortable, the dash was cluttered, and every corner creaked under pressure. Owners reported breakdowns and strange handling issues as early as the first year. And then there was the rust, aggressive, fast-spreading, and merciless. Within a few winters, many Gremlins were already falling apart. Drivers complained about rough handling, awkward weight distribution, and cheap interiors. Yet somehow, it sold. Maybe it was the price. Maybe it was national pride. Maybe it was just the 70s. But love quickly turned to regret. Rust came quickly. Engine troubles were common, and the car's quirky charm faded the moment it needed repairs. AMC bet big on a car that felt more like a rushed prototype than a finished product. Today, the Gremlin is more of a punchline than a collector's item, a strange little box on wheels that reminds us how desperation and design rarely mix. The Nintendo Virtual Boy looked like a spaceship crashed into a pair of binoculars and decided to play games. Released in the mid-1990s, it was Nintendo's leap into virtual reality, except it did not leap so much as stumble. Players had to shove their faces into a visor mounted on a little stand like they were doing a weird science experiment. The display? Glowing red wireframe graphics on a black screen? That was it. No color, no depth, just eye strain and headaches. And yes, people really did complain about headaches. It was supposed to be portable, but you could not move your head while using it. It was supposed to be immersive, but most games barely lasted 30 minutes before your eyes begged for mercy. Nintendo hyped it up as the future of gaming. The reality was a lonely desk toy that cost too much and delivered too little. Sales were disastrous. Fewer than 1 million units sold. Even die-hard Nintendo fans stayed quiet about this one. It was discontinued within a year, swept under the rug like a secret no one wanted to admit. But Virtual Boy did one thing right. It showed Nintendo where not to go. Today, it lives on as a cautionary tale. A strange relic from a time when red lines and motionless goggles were somehow considered cutting edge. The Virtual Boy did not fail quietly. It failed in bright, flashing red. Rotisserie ovens for the home looked like the centerpiece of a kitchen that truly had it all. Spinning meat, golden and glistening behind a glass panel, promised restaurant-style meals without ever leaving your house. It was showy, dramatic, and felt like a little bit of television magic landed on your countertop. But the excitement quickly gave way to dread. These ovens took forever. They cooked unevenly. One side of the chicken would crisp, while the other side sagged and steamed. Grease splattered everywhere, dripping down into trays that were impossible to clean properly. And because they were bulky, they devoured counter space and collected dust when not in use, which was most of the time. Still, people wanted to believe. After all, what was more luxurious than carving a whole roast straight from a spinning spit? But that luxury came at a cost, and not just in electricity. It came in the form of undercooked dinners, burnt edges, and a smell that never quite left the kitchen. Eventually, most rotisserie ovens were shoved into storage or gifted to a cousin who loved to cook. They were kitchen theater, flashy, noisy, and mostly impractical. But for a moment in time, they made home cooks feel like gourmet chefs, even if the audience never clapped. Tamagotchi was the original digital pet, and for a while it ruled recess. But then came the spin-offs, the Gigapets, Nano Babies, and every other pixelated creature someone tried to hatch on a keychain. These knockoffs flooded the market fast, and they fizzled out even faster. Every company wanted a piece of the virtual pet craze, but few could capture the charm and chaos of the original. Some pets were too needy, others barely moved. The graphics got worse, the batteries died quicker, and in most cases, the novelty wore off before the batteries even ran out. Kids who begged for one lost interest by the weekend. The market got saturated, and with every new release, the magic thinned out. What started as a digital revolution turned into background noise. Parents were not fooled. Teachers banned them from classrooms. And before long, Gigapets and their spin-off friends were stuffed in drawers, replaced by newer, shinier distractions. Tamagotchi may still have a nostalgic pulse, but its clones are long forgotten. Sometimes imitation is not flattery, it is just a shortcut to failure. The next food flop was so public, so massive, it became a punchline, and briefly made an entire country agree on something. They hated the taste of the new Coke. New Coke was not a new flavor, it was a national crisis. In 1985, the Coca-Cola Company decided to change its signature formula, replacing the classic soda with something sweeter, smoother, and supposedly more modern. It backfired instantly. Americans did not just dislike it, they rebelled against it. People wrote angry letters. Some hoarded old Coke in basements. Protests popped up in front of bottling plants. News anchors ran emotional segments about lost tradition. The backlash was so fierce that Coca-Cola was forced to bring back the original recipe just months later, rebranded as Coca-Cola Classic. Today, New Coke is remembered as the biggest beverage blunder of the 1980s. But at least it was trying something new. Let us start with something that tried way too hard to be the future of entertainment. The video disc player, specifically RCA's capacitance electronic disc, or CED for short, except we are not using abbreviations here, so let us just call it what it was. A huge plastic record that you shoved into a machine in hopes of watching a movie. It looked like vinyl, but it definitely was not groovy. You needed a special player, the discs were fragile and rewinding. Not happening. It was like asking your television to do a ballet recital while wearing hiking boots. It launched in the early 1980s and flopped so hard that even RCA, the company behind it, backed out just a few years later. People already had VHS tapes. They had beta tapes. Nobody asked for a third format that looked like a frisbee and handled like a toddler on a sugar rush. Sure, the packaging was cool, but it was a disaster in living rooms. It took up space and made too much noise, and not the good kind. This thing had all the flash and none of the function. But if you thought that was loud, wait until you see what came down the slopes wearing a highlighter. But even with a football legend at the front, it still missed the catch. The 1980s really wanted men to care about gloves. Not work gloves, not winter gloves, but luxury comfort gloves. Enter Isotoner. They were supposed to be the Cadillac of handwear, sleek, stretchy, and backed by none other than Dan Marino himself. Yes, that Dan Marino. The glove was featured in ads where Marino would flash his hands like they were national treasures. The pitch was simple. Your hands deserve respect. The reality? Nobody was asking for this. These gloves were fine, but they were not revolutionary, and certainly not life-changing. Isotoner's massive ad campaign made the product feel overhyped and weirdly intimate. Like, why is Dan Marino caressing his own hands like that? It was one of those rare cases where the marketing machine worked too hard and ended up making the product feel silly. Plus, most people buying gloves in the 1980s were not doing it because of a sports endorsement. They were doing it because it was snowing. And if you think that is strange, in the 1950s, music found its wings with the transistor radio. transforming beaches into personal concert venues where friends gathered, basking under the sun while top 40 tunes played, a soundtrack to youthful summers. This small device brought melodies and voices not just into homes, but into open spaces, making the world feel a touch smaller, fitting snugly into one's hand. Inventors like William Shockley gave us a tool that connected us to the outer world in a manner both intimate and expansive. The radio delivered music, news, and live sports with a static crackle, adding a layer of authenticity to every broadcast. Despite the digital age, radio's essence survives, transformed yet enduring, a testament to its role as the soundtrack of the 20th century. It glowed like nuclear waste and tasted like citrus sugar and ghosts. Hi-C Ecto Cooler was not just a juice box, it was a phenomenon. Slapped with the green face of Slimer from Ghostbusters, it rode the wave of 1980s pop culture straight into kids' lunchboxes. For many, this was the crown jewel of cafeteria trading. One sip, and you were instantly cooler. Parents bought it for peace, kids drank it for power. But then the movies stopped, the cartoons dried up, and without its pop culture engine, Ecto Cooler slowed to a crawl. In the late 1990s, it was rebranded under different names, but it was never the same. The color changed, the taste faded. By the early 2000s, it was gone. And yet, people never let it go. Fan campaigns begged for its return. It popped up again for a brief moment with the Ghostbusters reboot in 2016, like a ghost of its former self. But that did not last. Ecto Cooler's magic was tied to a time, a vibe, a feeling you cannot mass-produce anymore. It was artificial, yes, but it was also real in the way it made us feel, like summer break in a box, gone, but never quite dead. They were supposed to bring families closer, literally. The 1970s conversation pit was the sunken living room trend that promised intimacy, a cool, modern flair, and space-saving elegance. You would step down into a cozy nest of shag carpet and low-slung cushions surrounded by walnut paneling and maybe even a built-in bar. It looked like something from a futuristic home magazine, the kind of place where you could host groovy parties or settle in for deep chats. But in practice, it was awkward, inconvenient, and kind of dangerous. People tripped, drinks spilled, kids fell. The novelty of a lowered living space wore off fast when people realized how hard it was to furnish and how easy it was to injure yourself. In the end, the only thing the conversation pit really sparked was a conversation about remodeling costs. And cleaning it? Imagine vacuuming stairs and crevices after every visit. As the decades wore on, what had once seemed bold and modern quickly felt dated and bizarre, like a relic of a dream that never quite worked. Real estate agents began referring to them as trip pits. Renovators filled them in. It turns out that deliberately building a hole into your living room is not the best long-term plan. And while conversation pits disappeared quietly, their colorful cousin in the kitchen refused to go without making a scene. Instant breakfast cubes. They sound like something a time traveler would pack, right? Small, compact cubes that supposedly gave you a full breakfast with just a few chews. One flavor even promised the taste of bacon and eggs. The marketing pitch? Pure convenience. No cooking, no cleanup, just pop it in your mouth and start your day. But here's the thing. Nobody wants to chew their pancakes. These things were dry, chalky, and tasted like someone crammed a greasy diner into a vitamin pill. Most people had to drink water just to get them down. Plus, they were weirdly expensive. The kind of price tag that made you say, I could buy real food instead. Families tried them once for the novelty, and then shoved them in the back of the pantry where they sat until the expiration date. The only people who mildly enjoyed them were hikers and doomsday preppers, and even they admitted it was more about storage than taste. What made it worse? The cubes melted in the heat and crumbled in your pocket. Breakfast was not supposed to feel like a science experiment, but that did not stop companies from trying to futurize every part of the day, including how you made a phone call from your car. When people talk about toys from the 1980s, there is always this sparkle in their eye. And more often than not, Somewhere in the conversation, the name Coleco comes up. This was the company that gave us the ColecoVision, a game console that dared to dream a little bigger than Atari. But they also brought Cabbage Patch Kids into the mainstream, those little yarn-haired dolls that caused stampedes in department stores. Parents would fight tooth and nail to bring one home. Coleco was riding high, bursting into every American living room like it owned the place. But that was the problem. It tried to own too much. Flush with success, Coleco expanded fast. Too fast. They took on the Atom computer, a disaster of a product that lost them millions. The tech was rushed, the marketing confused, and suddenly they were bleeding cash. Meanwhile, Nintendo was coming in hot with the NES, and Coleco could not keep up. By the mid-1980s, it was over. Bankruptcy followed, and the name faded into memory. But for a moment, Coleco was everywhere. On our shelves, in our commercials, at the center of our holiday wish lists. It was a name that felt like it would always matter. Now, most people do not even remember what Coleco stood for. It is strange how a brand can go from a household name to a trivia question in just a few years. No fear. Apparel was the loudest, quiet confidence the 1990s had to offer. It was for kids who did not just play sports, they lived them. The brand was all over dirt bikes, snowboards, skateboards, anywhere speed met attitude. Their slogans were printed in bold block letters. Second place is the first loser. Fear is a choice. Every shirt felt like it came with its own soundtrack. But as powerful as the message was, the identity never expanded. The brand aged with its first fans and could not grow beyond the extreme sports bubble it had built. Fashion trends moved fast in the early 2000s, and suddenly, baggy graphic tees looked more tired than tough. It did not help that other streetwear brands started merging style with subculture better. No Fear got left behind. The irony is hard to ignore. The brand that told kids to conquer their fears fell to its own fear of evolving. But for those who wore it, it was not just clothing, it was armor. And even now, somewhere in a storage bin or a thrift store, that old shirt still stares back, daring the world to underestimate you again. S.H. Kress & Company was not just a department store. It was the heartbeat of a downtown era we have long buried under strip malls and sterile plazas. The buildings alone were masterpieces, Art Deco dreams with copper canopies and bold glass fronts that felt more like theaters than stores. You could walk in and feel the hum of the crowd, kids sipping sodas at the lunch counter, mothers thumbing through bolts of cloth, and the smell, a mix of waxed floors, popcorn, and something sweet baking behind the scenes. Kress was where your grandmother bought her Sunday gloves, where your parents found school supplies for a dime. It made shopping feel like an occasion. These were the kinds of places where time moved slower, where you felt like you belonged. But what really made Kress unforgettable was its sense of place. It was always downtown, always near the courthouse or city square. It was the anchor of Main Street, nestled in with shoe shines and diners. On Saturdays, families made an event of walking there, pressing faces against the glass displays before heading inside to feel the soft fabric of new dreams. And when Kress fell, it was not just a brand that disappeared. It was a rhythm, a ritual, a piece of local culture. The buildings were repurposed into sterile chain pharmacies, or worse, left to rot. What was once magical became mundane. How did we let something so beautiful become background noise? Digital watches were the future, wrapped around your wrist, until they were not. When they first appeared in the 1970s, they were sleek, glowing, and outrageously expensive. A symbol of status, a glimpse into the digital age. But beneath the space-age display, there were problems. The early models had terrible battery life, were hard to read in sunlight, and broke far too easily. And then came the cheap knockoffs, flooding stores, undercutting the pioneers. Suddenly, what was once a futuristic marvel became a dime store gimmick. The early adopters felt burned, quite literally in some cases, as heat issues emerged. Buttons stuck, screens dimmed, and the mystique faded into frustration. Repairing them cost almost as much as replacing them. And with trends moving faster than ever, the digital watch's window of glory slammed shut. What was once elite tech became a novelty, and then a joke. People missed the reliability of analog, the craftsmanship, the soul of a ticking hand. Digital watches never truly vanished, but their glamour died fast. They taught the world a simple truth. Just because something is new does not mean it is better. Soda was Coca-Cola's attempt to be ironic before anyone really understood what irony was. Released in the early to mid-1990s, OK Soda was marketed to disaffected teens with phrases like, "Everything is going to be okay," and surreal artwork on the cans. It looked like a zine had a baby with a philosophy class. The drink itself was grayish, vaguely citrus-flavored, and immediately forgettable. But the marketing? Oh, the marketing. It leaned so hard into Gen X cynicism that it collapsed under its own weight. Instead of saying, "This drink is great," it said, "This drink might be fine, or not. Whatever." That kind of thing might work in a college dorm room conversation, but not in a supermarket aisle. Teens were confused, parents were unimpressed, and Coca-Cola realized way too late that trying to be cool by pretending not to care is still trying to be cool. OK Soda never went nationwide. Sales were soft, reviews were lukewarm at best, and by the end of the decade, it was gone. It tried to speak for a generation and ended up talking to itself. OK Soda was more of a mood than a product, and moods, like trends, fade fast. Electric can openers built into countertops were once the pride of high-end kitchen design. They looked sleek, modern, and promised effortless convenience. Just push a button, and your can of peaches or condensed milk opened itself while you leaned back like royalty. But the reality was far messier. They jammed constantly, blades dulled quickly. And when they broke, because they always broke, they were nearly impossible to fix. Built directly into the counter or the cabinet, they could not just be replaced like a handheld model. They became kitchen dead weight. Worse, food splatter would collect in the mechanism, turning it into a breeding ground for grime. People started using them less and less until eventually they forgot they were even there. But for a while, this was the height of kitchen automation. And yet, for a short time, pressing that button felt like living in a house of the future. It felt like progress, even if what you got was a lid half cut and a countertop stained with tomato sauce. In the end, these can openers taught people something important. Just because something looks built in does not mean it should be. Harley-Davidson perfume was the brand extension absolutely no one saw coming, and for good reason. In the 1990s, someone at Harley-Davidson decided to bottle up the spirit of the open road and turn it into a fragrance. The result? A line of perfumes and colognes that smelled less like leather and motor oil and more like a boardroom trying way too hard. It was an awkward mashup of tough guy branding and department store sensibility. Imagine walking into a motorcycle dealership and walking out with a floral-scented gift set. The core Harley audience, the rugged, rebellious riders, wanted horsepower, not heart notes. And the people who actually bought perfume? They were not looking for something wrapped in chrome and faux grit. Sales tanked, fast. It was a branding misfire that taught everyone a lesson. Not every lifestyle can be bottled. The fragrance faded quickly from shelves and memory, leaving behind one important reminder. Just because you can sell something does not mean you should. The next product went down for the exact opposite reason. It tried to turn bubblegum into soda, and America gagged. Hubba Bubba Soda sounded like a joke, but it was real, fizzy, and unfortunately, very pink. Inspired by the gum that filled every kid's pocket in the 1980s, the soda promised that same sweet, stretchy bubblegum taste, in liquid form. It was created by the Wrigley Company and sold in neon bottles that practically shouted from the shelf. The first sip was pure sugar. The second sip was regret. People could not quite figure out what they were drinking. Was it supposed to be candy or soda? And who exactly wanted to gulp bubblegum? The carbonation only made things worse, turning the already strange flavor into a syrupy explosion that clung to your throat. Kids might have tried it once for the novelty. Adults passed it over with a wince. Now imagine being a kid in the 1980s. You see a commercial where a kid is floating through the air like they are on the moon. Enter moon shoes, mini trampolines for your feet. A miracle of plastic, rubber bands, and hope. The packaging promised anti-gravity fun. But what you got was 2 slabs of plastic that shook your ankles into submission. You strapped them onto your sneakers, took a few hopeful jumps, and within 5 minutes, you were sitting on the ground nursing a bruised shin. They were supposed to be fun. Instead, they became an unofficial rite of passage for backyard injuries. Sure, you might get one satisfying bounce in before the strap snapped off or your foot twisted sideways like it had a mind of its own. But that did not stop kids from begging for them. We were promised space adventures. We got orthopedic bills. Still, for one fleeting second, you felt like an astronaut. And then you remembered you were just in the driveway, stuck in a pair of squeaky plastic traps. But if your feet were not being tortured, chances are your telephone was, because the next trend had a serious case of over-accessorizing. Talk about the time Atari thought your forehead could play video games. The Atari MindLink sounds like something a supervillain would use to take over the world, but in reality, it was a headband, a plastic one, that claimed to read your thoughts and turn them into in-game controls. The promise was simple: no hands, no controllers, just your mind. And that promise immediately hit a brick wall called 1980s science. The MindLink was supposed to pick up electrical signals from your forehead muscles and translate them into commands. In practice, that meant you had to clench and twitch your brow in weird ways to move a pixel around the screen. The truth was that the MindLink was way ahead of its time, and not in a good way. It launched into testing and was quickly shelved when even Atari realized nobody wanted to win Space Invaders with their eyebrows. Maybe it would have worked better as a meditation trainer or a fancy headache inducer. Either way, the MindLink was canceled before it ever hit store shelves, and thank goodness, because if it had gone mainstream, we might all be sitting in silence, furrowing our brows to check email. Imagine a time when the centerpiece of every living room was a bulky, boxy behemoth, the CRT TV. Coming into prominence in the 1950s, this technological marvel turned the humble living room into a bustling family theater. Picture the excitement as families gathered around to watch the moon landing or the latest episode of I Love Lucy. Despite its hefty frame, the CRT TV was the window to the world, until the sleek and slender flat screens of the early 2000s gently nudged it into the annals of history. Yet, ask any vintage video game enthusiast, and they'll wax poetic about the unmatched charm of playing on a CRT. Before streaming in HD, the CRT TV was the family's bond, the newsbringer, and the entertainer, all rolled into one. There was nothing quiet about the way Quisp cereal burst into childhood. Its electric pink box and the little alien mascot with a propeller on his head felt like Saturday morning wrapped in sugar. The cereal was sweet, corn-based, and shaped like flying saucers, a perfect match for its intergalactic branding. In the 1980s, this was not just food, it was an identity. It lived next to action figures, cartoons, and color TV. But as tastes shifted, Quisp began losing its ground. Its twin cereal rival Quake had already disappeared earlier, and Quisp slowly followed, becoming harder to find. The cereal aisle was transforming. Health trends, fancier brands, and less sugary options muscled out the weird and wonderful. Kids grew up, the mascot faded, and Post stopped pushing it. The strange part is, Quisp never officially died. It would reappear in limited batches or online like a ghost from a breakfast past. But by the time the world logged on, Quisp had already been forgotten by most. You would be hard-pressed to find a younger millennial who even knows what it tasted like. For a cereal that once claimed to be the quasi-energy cereal, Quisp's quiet fade-out is almost too poetic. A sugar-fueled dream, lost to time and trend. Popcorn ceilings were everywhere, and you did not think twice about them until one started flaking into your cereal. Created as an easy solution for soundproofing and hiding imperfections, these textured ceilings were sprayed on like cheap whipped cream, giving homes a bumpy, cratered look that no one questioned until they started falling apart. Vacuuming the ceiling became an actual task in some households, and painting over them was a test of endurance and futility. But the real danger was deeper than dust. Many popcorn ceilings contained asbestos, a now-banned toxic material that can cause serious health issues. Once people found out, the ceiling went from being just ugly to outright terrifying. Suddenly, every flake falling from above felt like a silent threat you could not ignore. That meant removing them was not just inconvenient, it was dangerous and expensive. Families who had lived under them for years were suddenly advised to bring in professionals just to make their homes safe again. Something meant to be invisible became the most threatening part of the room. And the disasters did not stop there. Just take a look under your feet. Enter the Sony CV2000. This was supposed to be the next big leap in home entertainment, a video recorder you could use at home long before VHS was a thing. It sounds amazing, right? Until you realize this beast was massive, heavy, and cost more than most people's cars at the time. We are talking over $1,000 in 1960s money, which is a good chunk of a year's salary for the average person. But price was just one problem. The CV2000 used reel-to-reel videotape, and even getting it to work with your television set was a gamble. It only recorded in black and white. You had to plug in a separate camera, adjust the knobs just right, and cross your fingers. If anything went wrong, and it often did, you were stuck. Playback was spotty, the tapes jammed constantly, and editing footage? Forget it. For a product meant to bring television magic into your home, it mostly just brought headaches. And despite being the first of its kind, it quietly faded into obscurity, beaten later by cheaper, easier options. There was a time when walking into a Radio Shack and seeing a Tandy computer on display felt like stepping into the future. These were not just machines, they were status symbols. Having one meant your family was ahead of the curve. Tandy was Radio Shack's answer to IBM and Apple, and for a short while, it worked. The price was right, and the software support was decent. Schools even started to adopt them. But this was the 1980s, and the tech world was evolving fast. You could learn basic programming in your bedroom or type out homework assignments that actually looked professional. Tandy helped make personal computing feel possible for everyday families. Tandy tried to do it all, from computers to peripherals to proprietary software, and none of it could keep up with the competition. IBM opened their systems, and Apple got sleek. Meanwhile, Tandy stayed clunky. The name started to feel dated, and the machines began collecting dust. Radio Shack doubled down instead of pulling back. By the 1990s, the computers were gone, and the stores were not far behind. Tandy is one of those names that feels like a ghost now, an echo of when technology was still a little bit magical. The kind of brand you bring up and people say, "Oh yeah, I remember that." Then comes the silence. Blockbuster Video was not just a store, it was the weekend plan. Friday nights meant neon lighting, rows of tapes, and the quiet excitement of choosing the right movie to keep the family entertained for hours. There was nothing quite like the feel of that plastic clamshell in your hand, or the thrill of spotting the just-returned cart before anyone else. But that world vanished fast. In the early 2000s, while Blockbuster executives were busy doubling down on late fees, a tiny upstart named Netflix was quietly mailing DVDs with no deadlines. By the time Blockbuster tried to play catch-up, streaming had already flipped the game. It was not just a business mistake, it was a cultural blind spot. Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix and passed. Imagine that. The very brand that had defined entertainment for a generation fell behind because it forgot to look ahead. There was something about the blue and yellow glow of a Blockbuster sign that made any town feel a little more alive. But in the end, it became a relic, frozen in time like the movies it once carried. And now, a whole generation will grow up never knowing the magic of wandering those aisles. Bradley's felt like a neighborhood you could shop in. It was not the biggest store on the block, but it was the one that remembered your face. Especially in the Northeast, Bradley's was as familiar as the post office or the local diner. It had those narrow aisles lined with basics: socks, sweaters, toys, and towels. But there was warmth there, too. Some stores even had snack counters where tired shoppers could recharge with a soft pretzel or soda. You could walk in needing a winter coat and walk out with holiday lights and a smile. It was not fancy, but it felt like home. Bradley's made you feel like you belonged, no matter what you earned or wore. And then one day, it was gone. A few liquidations, a final clearance, another sign taken down, another memory paved over. And in its place, usually nothing, just an empty building echoing with what used to be. Why do our most comforting places always seem to vanish first? Gerber thought single adults wanted to eat like babies. In 1974, the baby food giant launched Gerber Singles, glass jars filled with pureed meatloaf, spaghetti, and other soft, mushy meals. For grown-ups. The logic was clear enough. Young professionals were living alone, cooking less, and shopping small. But nobody, not even in the strange, convenience-hungry 70s, wanted to eat meat paste in a nursery jar. There was no mistaking the look. It was identical to the baby food aisle, and no amount of rebranding could shake the association. People joked that you had to burp yourself after dinner. Focus groups reportedly laughed out loud during testing, and not in a good way. What Gerber thought was a niche need turned out to be a marketing misfire of legendary proportions. The packaging screamed infant formula. The contents looked like leftovers from a sick day. It bombed instantly. Consumers laughed, gagged, and moved on. Even the commercials had a weird, patronizing tone, as if adulthood was just a bigger diaper away. Gerber pulled the product from shelves and tried to forget it ever happened. But the memory stuck. To this day, Gerber Singles is brought up in marketing classes as a perfect example of how not to read your audience. They tried to feed nostalgia and got nothing but stomach-turning rejection. Crystal Pepsi was Pepsi's bold experiment to reinvent cola by removing everything that made it look like cola. The concept was genius on paper. Crystal clear soda with that familiar cola taste. It promised something futuristic, pure, and exciting, but instead delivered something confusing. When people took their first sip, they did not taste the future. They tasted cola that had been left out too long in a sunlit room. The marketing had gone all in, television ads with Van Halen's "Right Now" blasting in the background, sleek glass bottles, and a clean science lab aesthetic. But none of that could change the fact that the flavor was just off. It was like your taste buds were expecting a party and got a PowerPoint presentation instead. Consumers did not know what to do with it. Was it a health soda? Was it supposed to be a new lifestyle? Why fix something that was never broken? That confusion was its downfall. Within 2 years, it was gone from shelves, never to be seen again, except in retro countdowns like this one. Some people still remember the taste, others only remember the disappointment. Crystal Pepsi wasn't just a product, it was a moment. A clear window into what happens when branding gets too clever for its own good. It tried to give us something new, but sometimes clarity is overrated. Frigidaire Ice Crusher refrigerator looked like the kind of luxury only seen in the magazines. With its sparkling chrome accents, soft pastel tones, and a futuristic ice crusher built right in, this refrigerator was a showpiece. Housewives marveled at the convenience of crushed ice on demand. A real marvel in an era where entertaining at home meant everything. But the dream quickly melted into frustration. The ice crusher jammed constantly, spraying half-frozen shards into awkward clumps or refusing to work altogether. It made a terrible noise, like a blender chewing gravel. And worse, it often leaked inside the freezer, creating icy messes that ruined everything from fish fillets to frozen pies. Repairmen made their rounds, scratching their heads at the complicated mechanisms while assuring folks it was just a kink to work out. But the kink never went away. It became a kind of cold-hearted family member, temperamental, but always there. And when it finally gave out, it left behind more than broken parts. It left behind the memory of a time when having crushed ice felt like living in the future, even if that future came with puddles. Virtual Boy from Nintendo was not just a flop. It was a headache in a box. No, really. That is not a metaphor. This red and black 3D console was supposed to be the next big thing, a revolutionary gaming system that would transport players to other dimensions. What it did instead was give them eye strain, migraines, and a whole new reason to put the controller down. Released in 1995, Virtual Boy was Nintendo's first stab at virtual reality, and it missed the mark by a mile. The graphics were monochrome red, the headset was heavy, the gameplay was awkward, and the entire thing looked like laboratory equipment from a failed science fair. Even the most loyal Nintendo fans were baffled. There was no portability, the battery life was terrible, and you had to hunch over like a gargoyle just to play. The system launched with barely a dozen games and disappeared almost immediately from store shelves. For a company known for its magic touch, this was a rare misstep that everyone wanted to forget. But here is the thing. Some people still remember it fondly. Not because it was good, but because it tried. And sometimes, trying too hard is its own kind of failure. The next failure was worse. A cereal that confused parents, horrified dentists, and made breakfast feel like a bad prank. Frosted Coca-Cola cereal was exactly what it sounds like. Yes, really. In the sugar-soaked chaos of the 1980s, someone decided to turn the most famous soda in the world into a breakfast cereal. And not just a cereal flavored with cola, but a frosted cereal flavored with cola. The pitch was wild. Kids loved soda. Kids loved cereal. Why not combine them? What resulted was a sticky, chemical-tasting disaster that confused everyone who dared to pour milk over it. The cereal smelled like a vending machine. It was never widely distributed and vanished quickly, surviving only in a few advertisements and foggy memories. Today, it stands as one of the strangest food ideas of the decade. But even that did not stop brands from trying to turn fast food into something new. You were not just writing letters in the 1980s. You were sending sensory experiences. Perfumed stationery sets were the peak of pen pal drama. Heart-shaped pages with lace borders, sparkly envelopes, and enough floral scent to knock out a small room. There were sets that smelled like roses, vanilla, ocean breeze, or something suspiciously like bubblegum and detergent. You would open a note from your best friend and nearly pass out from the aroma. It was like the page had bathed in perfume and never toweled off. They were beautiful, romantic, and borderline unreadable. The ink would smudge from the coated paper. The scent would linger for days. And if you tried mailing one of these in the heat, good luck. The envelope might as well have been dipped in cologne. Still, it was all part of the charm. These notes were not meant to last forever. They were moments frozen in scent. They smelled like crushes and sleepovers and secrets told in cursive. But not all nostalgia smells sweet. Because the next 1980s trend? It looked like something straight out of a haunted dollhouse and somehow got greenlit as a beauty product. The Rejuvenique face mask promised younger, firmer skin through electrical muscle stimulation, which is a fancy way of saying it zapped your face with little shocks. Advertised by a former soap opera star, the mask wrapped around your head like a plastic exoskeleton and turned your facial routine into something that felt like a scene from a horror film. The idea was that the stimulation would tone your face like a gym tones your body, but customers mostly reported mild burns, numbness, and the distinct feeling that they had made a terrible mistake. Despite airing on television with the enthusiasm of a late-night miracle cure, it flopped hard. It was the kind of product that felt less like a beauty tool and more like a sci-fi movie prop that somehow escaped the set. Still, you had to admire the ambition. If you could survive the Rejuvenique, surely you could survive anything the 1980s had to throw at you. And as it turns out, that next throw was straight at the kids, because someone thought gym fashion should start in elementary school. In 1979, Sony unleashed a revolution that fit snugly into the pockets of a generation hungry for mobility: the Walkman. This wasn't just a device, it was a declaration of independence, allowing music to become a personal, portable experience. Suddenly, every walk to school, every bus ride, and every leisurely stroll had a soundtrack. The Walkman didn't just change how we listened to music, it changed where we listened, infusing the mundane with magic. As smartphones and streaming services emerged, the Walkman faded into the background, but not before it had indelibly changed our relationship with music. The legacy of the Walkman lives on in every smartphone's music app, a testament to the era when music first stepped out with us into the wide, wide world. Imagine pouring soda into your coffee. That is the experiment Coca-Cola tried in the late 1980s during test runs, before officially releasing it as Coca-Cola Black in the 2000s. It was a strange blend of dark cola and coffee essence, a drink that was neither refreshing nor warm, just caffeinated and confused. The name had an accent mark, like it was trying too hard. And maybe it was. Black was marketed as sophisticated, international, sleek. But the taste? Most people described it as burnt sugar with a hint of dirt. It never found its audience. Coffee drinkers wanted real coffee. Soda fans wanted sweetness, not bitterness. In the end, Coca-Cola Black fell into the gap between two strong traditions and belonged to neither. It was pulled from shelves almost as quickly as it arrived. But what is more fascinating is how early Coca-Cola tried this idea, long before energy drinks became common. They saw the future. They just took the wrong path to get there. Black was bold, ambitious, and completely out of touch, like a tuxedo at a barbecue. And that is why no one really cried when it vanished. Some flavors are just better left in the lab. The next design trend went everywhere and reflected everything. At some point, someone decided mirrors did not belong on just the walls of dance studios. They belonged in your living room too. Mirrored walls were supposed to open up small spaces and reflect natural light. What they actually did was double your clutter, amplify fingerprints, and make your guests deeply uncomfortable. People would walk past their own reflections during dinner, trying not to make eye contact with themselves. The idea was chic. The reality was cold, clinical, and impossible to keep clean. What was meant to make your room look bigger ended up making it look busier, messier, and 10 times more high maintenance. And once one mirror cracked or peeled, the illusion of glamour shattered instantly. Every smudge, every streak, every greasy fingerprint stood out like graffiti. If you tried to hang art on them, you ended up with a framing nightmare. And if one cracked, it did not just ruin the wall, it shattered the illusion entirely. Mirrored walls were the visual equivalent of trying too hard, and as it turns out, they were not even the most fragile design feature of the decade. That title belonged to something hiding right above your head. Enter the early Motorola pager. The idea was amazing. A small device you could clip to your belt, and when someone needed you, it would beep. Revolutionary, except it barely worked. The first commercial pagers rolled out in the early 1960s, and they were supposed to change everything. But the range was horrible. In most cities, they only worked in a few downtown zones. If you stepped too far outside, say goodbye to your connection. Not to mention, these early pagers were clunky little bricks with antennas sticking out and batteries that drained faster than a flashlight on Halloween. Oh, and the signal was only one way. You got a page, but you could not respond unless you found a payphone. So really, you were just being told to go call someone, urgently, without any context. In hospitals or offices, it sort of made sense. But for everyday people, it was just a noisy gadget that told you nothing and helped even less. Still, it laid the groundwork for communication on the go. But speaking of on the go, let us talk about one of the weirdest, most unnecessary attempts at portable food ever invented. And trust me, you could not wash this one down with coffee. In the age of big hair and aerobics tapes, there was a diet soda that tasted like rebellion. It was Tab Cola, sleek pink can, zero sugar, and a cult following that bordered on obsessive. Tab was Coca-Cola's first foray into the diet world, and for a while, it worked. People loved it, or at least got used to it. It was the drink of choice for the calorie-conscious before Diet Coke came to the party. But once Diet Coke arrived in 1982, everything changed. It had the Coca-Cola name and a smoother taste. Consumers jumped ship. Coca-Cola tried to keep Tab alive, niche flavors, bold marketing, but the writing was on the wall. Sales dropped, distribution narrowed, and by the time the 1990s rolled around, Tab was almost gone. Almost. A small but loyal fan base kept it alive longer than anyone expected, but even that could not last forever. The brand was officially discontinued decades later. Now it lives on as a memory, a pink can in a vintage vending machine, a reminder that being ahead of the trend does not always mean you stay in front. FUBU meant something. For us, by us. It was not just a tagline, it was a cultural shift. Born from hip-hop and the raw energy of New York City, FUBU was style, identity, and defiance stitched into every piece of fabric. It was for the kids who had never seen themselves in fashion before. And suddenly, there they were, front and center. In the 1990s, everyone wore FUBU. Athletes, rappers, classmates, your cousin who swore he'd make it big. The logos were bold, the lettering was loud, and the message was even louder. Wearing FUBU meant you understood where it came from, and more importantly, who it was for. It was a direct response to being ignored by mainstream fashion for too long, and when LL Cool J dropped that unscripted FUBU shout-out in a Gap commercial, it became the stuff of legend. But then came overexposure. The brand expanded fast, too fast. Department stores flooded their shelves, and the brand's hard-earned authenticity began to blur. As the 2000s arrived, new streetwear labels stepped in, offering fresh voices and cleaner aesthetics. FUBU never truly disappeared, but it faded. For something built on cultural capital, losing relevance was a quiet kind of heartbreak. And still, for those who remember, putting on that FUBU jersey felt like stepping into your own spotlight. Hess's was pure spectacle. It was more than just a department store, it was a show. The kind where the windows danced at Christmas, where the escalators felt like magic carpets, where elegance was not just sold, it was performed. Based in Pennsylvania, Hess's knew how to make shopping feel like a celebration. The clothes sparkled, the displays turned heads, and the restaurant upstairs? Legendary. Mothers in their Sunday best would bring their children for a treat, teaching them that stores could be destinations, not just errands. Hess's knew the value of a good impression. In the 70s and 80s, it stood for fashion, fun, and a bit of fantasy. Then came the slow crumble. Ownership changed hands, the sparkle dimmed, and what was once a jewel of community pride became just another ghost of retail past. How do you say goodbye to a place that once made you feel so alive? New Coke was Coca-Cola's biggest gamble, and it nearly destroyed them. In 1975, Coca-Cola tried to fix something that was not broken. Worried about Pepsi's growing popularity, they reformulated their century-old recipe and launched New Coke with fanfare. The backlash was instant. People rioted, letters flooded in, talk show hosts mocked it nightly. Coca-Cola underestimated one thing: nostalgia. Americans did not want sweeter. They wanted familiar, comforting, real. Blind taste tests may have favored the new formula, but taste alone was never the point. Coca-Cola was part of America's identity, not just a drink. Messing with it felt like rewriting history, and people took it personally. Some customers even hoarded cases of the original, fearing it might never return. It was not just about flavor. It was about memory, ritual, and pride. Within months, the company was forced to bring back the original as Coca-Cola Classic, quietly phasing out the new formula. It remains one of the most famous marketing disasters of all time, a case of branding overstepping its bounds and learning that some flavors are not just tastes, they are memories. Snackwell's fat-free cookies were the miracle snack that promised everything and delivered nothing. In the 1990s, fat was the enemy, so when Snackwell's introduced cookies with zero fat, people went wild. Boxes flew off the shelves, moms filled pantries. It was like you could finally have dessert without guilt. But what no one mentioned was that to make up for the missing fat, Snackwell's added loads of sugar. The cookies tasted sweet but weirdly hollow, like someone had baked them in a lab. And instead of stopping at 2 or 3, people ate half the box, thinking it was fine because, hey, zero fat, right? That led to what dietitians later called the Snackwell effect, when you overeat foods that seem healthy but really are not. Sales boomed, then crashed. The brand faded, the diet myth was exposed, and everyone quietly moved on. Snackwells was not just a snack. It was a symbol of how badly we wanted to believe in shortcuts. The Amana Raider range was a beast in every sense of the word. It was massive, expensive, and powerful enough to feel like you were cooking with radiation, which, technically, you were. When it debuted, it felt like something out of a science fiction movie. No more ovens, no more waiting. Just press a button and zap, dinner was served. Except that zap came with confusion, trial and error, and the occasional ruined meal. The Radar range was intimidating. It hummed like a generator and took up half the kitchen counter. Instruction manuals were thick, filled with warnings, and nobody quite knew how long to cook anything. Meat cooked unevenly, soup boiled over, and forget about metal, one spark, and you felt like you had summoned lightning. Still, people marveled at it. It was the future after all, even if it scared them a little. Eventually, sleeker, quieter, and more user-friendly models took over, but those early Radar ranges left their mark. They were not just appliances, they were conversation starters. They proved that Americans were willing to put up with a lot in the name of progress. Today, we take microwave convenience for granted, but back then, you had to earn it, with nerves of steel and a manual always nearby. Barbie fashion designer CDROM sounded like a dream until you actually booted it up. In theory, it was supposed to let kids design outfits for Barbie, print them, and even dress up their dolls in real fabric. It promised creativity and interactivity. But what you got instead was clunky graphics, laggy controls, and a user interface that felt like it was designed in 5 minutes. It was slow, it was limited, and for a product tied to one of the most iconic brands in the world, it was shockingly underwhelming. The software ran on early home computers, which meant crashing was common and patience was mandatory. The actual gameplay? Repetitive. You picked colors, you clicked patterns, and then you waited forever to print something that barely stuck together. It looked glamorous on the box, but played like a PowerPoint presentation. For many kids, this was their first experience with disappointment in the digital age. Barbie deserved better. So did the players. Instead of sparking imagination, it just kind of sat there, slow, awkward, and way less fun than just using your own scissors and glitter. The next treat failed by doing everything just right, and still disappearing anyway. Keebler Magic Middles should have lasted forever. They were soft, buttery shortbread-style cookies with warm fudge or peanut butter centers, baked just enough to hold together but gooey when you bit in. Kids loved them. Parents loved them. Even picky snackers loved them. They were the rare treat that delivered exactly what it promised, magic in the middle. But they were not easy to make. The filling process was tricky, the baking time had to be just right, and they were more expensive to produce than simpler cookies. So despite their popularity, Keebler quietly pulled them from shelves in the 1990s, and they never came back. But if the downfall of Magic Middles felt personal, the synthesizer, the drum machine, the shoulder pads, all came together for the golden age of synth pop in the 1980s. And while some bands carved out legacies that still echo today, there were many that burst onto the scene with one song, rode the radio waves hard, and then vanished like a fog machine in a gymnasium. These were the one-hit wonders of synth pop. Groups with names that sounded like computer errors, album covers that looked like laser tag invitations, and beats that could only be danced to under a disco ball or beneath neon lights. You probably remember the song, maybe even the music video, but ask someone to name a second track and all you will get is a confused look. They were catchy, addictive, and short-lived. It was like the sound itself had an expiration date. Still, the moment they were hot, they were hot. The genre was all style, minimal substance, and maximum eyeliner. But when the synthesizers started to fade and guitars came roaring back, these acts had nowhere to go. Much like their lyrics, they just drifted into the static. But if the music was fleeting, the next trend tried to leave its mark forever, sometimes quite literally, on your notebook paper. Get ready for a toy so random and out of left field, not even He-Man fans knew what to do with it. The 1980s were He-Man's golden hour. The action figures, the cartoon, the castles, it all worked. Until it did not. Enter the Meteorbs. These were plastic eggs that transformed into robotic dinosaurs and beasts. Sounds cool in theory, right? Well, not exactly. They were a spin-off that nobody asked for and few even understood. The Meteorbs came from outer space, at least according to the convoluted lore. And while He-Man's universe already had a lot going on, alien egg animals were a stretch too far. The figures were small, hard to transform, and did not mesh well with the bulkier, sword-wielding He-Man figures. The VCR, a marvel that arrived in the 1970s, was akin to a magician in a box, granting us the power to capture time itself. Suddenly, TV schedules no longer dictated our lives. We could record, rewind, and relive our favorite moments at will. The VCR was the herald of home cinema, a concept so revolutionary that even its hefty price tag couldn't dampen its allure. It's a testament to its impact that phrases like "be kind, rewind" are etched in the collective memory of a generation. As DVDs and streaming services emerged, the VCR's star faded, but its legacy of shaping family movie nights and introducing the world to video rentals lives on. The 1980s gave us a lot of winners, but these 60 items were not among them. Some deserved a second chance. Most did not. Drop a comment and tell us which one of these you actually owned, and whether you still have it collecting dust somewhere in a closet. If you enjoyed this trip back in time, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next one. Thanks for watching.